Okay, I'm going to give a presentation, I think a little bit different to the one you have already seen today, perhaps yesterday. This is going to be a not so technical presentation, but a little bit more philosophical. We are going to talk about standards, regulation, what is the relation between regulation and normalization, why we use standards, how are they made, and all this world, which is a quite unknown world for the people that are not participating or directly involved in this area. As he has introduced me, I work for Enel, to the Network Technologies unit. This is a global unit within the Enel group. Enel is a leading company utility in Italy. It has about 60 million customers in all the world. And previously, I have been working in the Endesa smart metering project. Endesa is the leading utility in Spain, the biggest distribution company. Endesa is right now deploying the smart metering system. They already have more than 5 million meters already installed and fully working. And I've been completely involved in the standardization process of the protocol that we are using in Endesa. The protocol is the Meters and More protocol. It's a communication protocol that includes not only lower layers, but also upper layers data model. And this protocol was proprietary from Enel in the beginning, but then it was open, and then we started a standardization process in Senelec in Europe, and I've been involved for the last 4 years in this process. So I've been quite involved in all these standardization activities. This is the agenda for this presentation. It's an introduction that I already have introduced part of the session. Then we will talk about terminology and concepts, just to clarify some concepts that people usually use, but sometimes not very accurately. Then we are going to talk about the main standardization fora, where you can standardize things. Which is the standardization procedure? If somebody wants to standardize something, what they have to do. We'll talk also a little bit about European regulatory framework and the relation with the standards. And then we will talk about mandates. There are 2 very important mandates regarding smart metering and smart grids, and we will talk about them. As introduction, I have already talked about myself and about activities, and we are going to talk about standards. Why standards are important? Why do we use standards? If we think in a very simple example, let's think, for example, the plug that any device can use to connect to the mains. Everybody can take any device and plug it in the mains, and this is because all the plugs are the same and they are compatible with the mains. Let's think for a moment that any manufacturer make a device with a different kind of plug. For example, the British plug, which is different. There would be impossible to plug it in the mains in Spain. So nobody would buy a product like that. Standards are not mandatory, they are voluntary, but they are very useful, because if you are a manufacturer, you have to follow the standards just to get an interoperability among the products, because if you want that your product can be used in Spain, for example, you have to adapt to the standards that are in use in Spain. If you are going to sell your product in Britain, you have to use the standard that they use in Britain. Nobody obliges you, but it's very useful for you to use it. They ease the market acceptance, of course. Nobody is going to buy something that does not adapt to the standard that we are using in our country. Eliminate technical barriers for the same reason in global markets. If you want to sell something widely, if you use standards, it's easy to reach global markets. And another point is that encourage networking and collaboration. This is in standardization fora, that they are collaborative fora, where all the people collaborate to get a consensus, as we'll see later, and you can get relation with with your competitors, with colleagues, with all the people which are involved in the same activity. Another important point is that provide information about the markets. When you are participating in a standardization fora, you are the first in get knowledge of the new things that are moving around. The next things that are going to appear in the markets, the first place where they appear is in the standardization fora, because there is where everybody puts the new trends of the technology. Let's clarify some terminology and concepts. Standard. What is a standard? This is a definition from the IEC, which is one of the most important standardization organizations. It says that a standard is a document established by consensus and approved by a recognized body that provides for common and repeat use rules, guidelines, or characteristics for activities or their results aimed at the achievement of the optimum degree of order in a given context. Here, the main ideas are the one underlined. It's a document, a standard is a document, it's established by consensus, it's not imposed by anybody, it's just a consensus between all the stakeholders. It has to be approved, because the standards, to be recognized, a standard has to be approved, and by a recognized body, not for anywhere, but a recognized body. And what includes this document? Provides common and repeat use rules and guidelines and characteristics. For what? For products or for activities, or for the result of the activities. And the goal, the maximum goal of all this is to achieve the optimum degree of the performance of this product or this activity. In Spain, the main organization, standardization organization is INOR, as we will see later, and the definition, norma, which is quite similar, but it includes, for example, is documento técnico. It adds that the document is a technical document that is voluntary. Consensus is the same as consensus, and is based mainly in the experience. Usually, all the specifications that are put forward for standardization are based on the experience, something that is already proved that it works, that is useful, and that's why people usually try to standardize things that are already useful. It has to be approved by a recognized body. It's the same. Then we have harmonized standards. An harmonized standard defined by Senelec is a harmonized standard is a European standard elaborated on the basis of a request from the European Commission to a recognized European standardization organization. We will see later about the mandate, and the mandate is just this, a request from the European Commission to the European Standardization Organization. The request is to develop a European standard that provides solution for compliance with a legal provision. What is this for? Regulation is mandatory, but the standards are not. But if you want to comply with the regulation, sometimes there is a standard that collects all the features that are requested by the regulation. So if you demonstrate that your product is compliant with a standard, which is not mandatory, you are at the same time demonstrating that you are compliant with the regulation, which is mandatory. So it's very important sometimes when the European Commission wants to put forward a regulation that they request to the standardization organization to create standards according to this legal provision. We will see later in the mandates. There is another terminology which is open specification. This is not the same as standard. Open specification is specification developed and or approved, but not by a recognized body. It's just developed by somebody, maybe a company, maybe an association, maintained by a collaborative, transparent, consensus-based process. Has to be collaborative. That means several companies together, though they are not a recognized body. This is why this is not a standard. And they may be subject also to intellectual property rights. Intellectual property right, but as we say, run, which means fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. That is, if somebody has invest money in developing a standard or a specification, they have the right to get this money back. So they can have intellectual property rights as far as they are reasonable, not abusive. So they can have fees, reasonable fees. Let's talk about the standardization fora. The main standardization fora we can find are the ITU, which is the International Telecommunication Union, which standardizes everything related with telecommunication worldwide level, international. IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission, which standardizes anything related with electrotechnical, and the ISO, which is International Organization for Standardization, which takes care of everything else. Everything that is not telecommunication, is not electrotechnical, will be standardized by ISO. Then we also have the IEEE, which is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, but it's a little bit different because this is a professional association. It's composed just by professionals, while the others are composed by companies. At the European level, the most important are ETSI, which is the European Telecommunication Standards Institute, which is more or less the same as the ITU, but at the European level. We have CENELEC, which is more or less the same as IEC at European level. Comité Européen de Normalisation Électrotechnique. And then we have CEN, which is Comité Européen de Normalisation, which is like ISO, but at European level. Those are those three institutions are recognized by the European Commission as the official standardization bodies in Europe. As we can see, there are a lot of standardization fora, but they don't work on themselves without coordination. They are very well coordinated. There are a lot of agreements between them, so that the work that is done in any of these standardization can be moved to the other just by using this agreement. In general, for example, most of the standards are developed by IEC in the electrotechnical area, and some of them only in CENELEC. But CENELEC is usually aware of all the tasks that are being carried out by IEC, and if this standard of these documents produced by IEC are good also for Europe, CENELEC adopt these documents with that CENELEC number. In the other way, this is by the agreement. In the other way, if CENELEC develops some documents, some standards, then CENELEC offers this document to IEC, so that if IEC considers this document is good for international standardization, they adopt this document without repeating the job and put an IEC number. So most of the standards has the different numbering depending on CENELEC, IEC, ISO with CEN, or ETSI with IETU. Focusing on Europe, CENELEC is one of the most important in the area we are working regarding smart grids, smart metering, and all this area. And the structure of CENELEC is this one. CENELEC is an association of national standardization bodies. The members of CENELEC are the national committees of all Europe. Then there is an administrative board which takes care of all the administrative issues, and the main part is the technical board. The technical board takes care of the technical tasks that are developed by CENELEC. Then there are technical bodies who really developed the tasks. A technical committee is nominated by the technical board, which is the main organization that controls all the technical activity. It has a specific scope. There is a technical committee for every scope for different areas, and is composed by the national committees of the member states, which puts a delegate in this committee. Right now, this is not really a technical body because it's composed by delegates nominated by the technical committees. But then, when any task has to be developed, the technical committee create a working group. In the working group, established by the technical committee, a committee is more or less the same to a committee, but with a more specific scope. And the working group is set up to develop short-term specific tasks. And now the working group, it is composed of experts. The experts are in the working group. Here is the real technical work to develop the standards. When the working group has reached a consensus by all the experts, the task has to be approved by the technical committee by voting all the national committees. We will see later in the standardization procedure. For example, Senelec, Technical Committee 13, is the one for electrical energy measurement and control. This is the one that relates to the protocols used in smart metering. This is the one where I have been participating to standardize the smart metering protocol used by Enel and Endesa. This is the web page of Senelec, where you can have all this information. You have the scope of this committee, and here is the definition of the scope. And then you have the structure, the documents, the meetings, and all information. The secretariat of this committee is France, the national committee from France. And the structure, this technical committee has right now two working groups. Working group 1 and 2. One is electricity meters for active energy of class A, B, and C, and working group 2 is for data models and protocols for additional functionality of and data exchange of interoperable multi-utility smart metering system. That means any kind of meters, not only electricity meters, but also gas, heat, or any other meters. Those two working groups are the ones that do the real technical task, and then the results are approved by the technical committee. In Spain, the main standardization organization is AENOR. AENOR is the Asociación Española de Normalización and is recognized by the government. It has a legal recognition by a royal decree that makes this the official standardization organization in Spain. It's a private institution, it's just an association, and it's an association of federation. It's an association of associations. For example, the electricity industry is represented in AENOR by UNESA. UNESA is the association of the electric companies in Spain and is the member of AENOR. So any electric company in Spain can participate in AENOR through UNESA, which is the association of all the electricity industry in Spain. Well, here you have some data. It has more than 30,000 standards in the portfolio of AENOR, more than 15,000 experts in the national committees, more than 3,000 Spanish experts in participating in international committees, in Senelec, in IEC, in ISO. Here you have the members of Senelec. The members of Senelec, as I said before, are the national standardization organization of every country. So every country is represented in Senelec. Spain is by AENOR, but any other country has its own standardization association, official association, which is recognized by Senelec. There are in total, I think, 33. Which is the standardization procedure? If somebody, a company, for example, has a specification developed by themselves and they want to make it open and they want to get a standard for this, what they have to do? Then you need, of course, a specification, a document, which is the base. You have to see which sector is this, just to select to which committee you have to address, which is your scope. You want to be a standard in Europe, in all the world. So with those three parameters, you choose the organization where you want to start this standardization procedure. You can go to ISO, to ETSI, to IEEE, to CENELEC, depending on those three parameters. Once you have chosen the place where you want to start the procedure, I'm going to refer to the standardization procedure within CENELEC, but most of the organizations are more or less the same, quite similar. You have to start by filling up a document which is called the new work item proposal. That is a proposal to the standardization organization that you want to standardize something. It's a request to the relevant organization, in this case to CENELEC. This document has to be approved by the national committees. Once you present the document to CENELEC, CENELEC distributes to all its members, which are the national committees, and they have to approve this document. Why? Because in the end, the task is going to be developed by the experts of the national committees. And that's why the national committees, they have to give the approval, and not only the approval, they have to provide experts. Because if the national committee do not provide experts, there's nobody to do the tasks. Sometimes there is a proposal for standardization, it's approved by the national committees, but nobody provides experts. So the task cannot be done. So besides the approval by national committees, experts has to be nominated. There is a minimum number of experts that has to be nominated in order to be able to carry out the standardization process. When this document is approved and experts have been nominated, then this is assigned to a working group. If there is an existing working group that can make the job, it's assigned to this working group. If not, a working group is created for this purpose. Then the working group has to make a work plan definition to carry out this standardization procedure. Usually the steps, more or less, that has to follow this task are those ones. There is a launching of the sorry. There is a kick-off meeting to launch the task where the work plan is presented. Then there are several meetings of the working group, of the expert, usually physical meetings or sometimes maybe remote meetings. And they prepare what they call a committee draft. It's a first document collecting all the point of view of all the stakeholders represented within the working group. And this document is circulated to all the national committees for comments. All the national committees can now make comments to this document just to improve it. The working group has to analyze all those comments and, depending on the comments, make a new version of the committee draft, including those comments that they consider that are good, they may not consider other comments. And with all the comments, a new document, a new version is produced, which is what it is called the CDV, which is the final draft for voting. This document is now circulated again to the national committees for voting. Now the national committees has to vote if they agree or not with this final text. If this document is approved by a majority, there are some rules about how the voting is done. If this document is approved by a majority of members, then the standard is done. It has to be ratified by the technical committee because all this task has been done at the working group level, but it has to be ratified by the technical committee. And then there is a final edition of the document, just to put it everything, the wording properly, and publishing. This whole process can take years. Sometimes may take from 1 to 3, sometimes even more years. All this, it is an iterative process, quite hard, quite difficult because let's think that all the experts are from different countries. It's not easy to join and to work together. So that's why it usually takes quite long to make a standard and to publish it. Now let's talk a little bit about the European regulatory framework, because right now we have been talking about standards which are not compulsory. Standards are voluntary, and you can use or not standards as you want. But regulation is compulsory. The main difference between standardization and regulation are those. Standardization are done from a standardization organization, while regulation is done from the regulation authorities. Standardization is by consensus. All the stakeholders join together, makes a working group, and they agree the final result. Regulation is an imposition. The regulator puts a regulation and imposes the regulation. This is not a collaborative process. Standards are voluntary. You can attach to them or not, but regulation is mandatory. Everybody has to comply with regulation. Standards are usually focused on sectoral interest, a concrete sectoral interest. Meanwhile, regulations are usually nationwide or even supranational interest. Those are different legislative acts by the European Commission. We may have regulation. Regulation is a binding legislative act. It must be applied in its entirety across all the European Union. These are regulation. Then we have directives. A directive is a little bit different. It's a legislative act that sets out a goal, just a goal. And now all the European countries must achieve the goal, but it's up to them, to the individual countries, to decide how they are going to achieve the goals. When there is a directive by the European Union, every country has to develop its own regulation in the country to achieve the goal imposed by the European Commission. Then there are decisions. A decision is binding, but only for those to whom the decision is addressed. The European Commission may take a decision on a company, on a single company, on a group of companies, or on a single country. So it is only binding for to whom the decision is addressed. And then there are another type of documents which are recommendations. Recommendations from the European Commission are not binding, do not have legal consequence, but if the country does not follow the recommendation, after the recommendation, we may have regulations. So be careful with recommendations, because sometimes we think that recommendations are not binding, and in the end, more or less, they are a little bit binding, because if majority of the countries do not follow the recommendation, the European Commission may set out a directive or a regulation in the end to reach their goal. Then we have mandates. What is a European mandate? A European mandate is a mechanism by which the European Commission and the Secretariat of the European Free Trade Association also request to the European Standardization Organization, we said before, SENS, CERELEC, and ETSI, to develop and adopt European standards to support European policies and legislation. For example, European Commission wanted to promote smart metering and smart grids, but there were no standards. So the manufacturers are a little bit afraid of producing products without having a standard to attach, because if every manufacturer makes products with different specification without any standards, then it's going to be quite difficult to introduce these products in the countries. So that's why it's important to have standards. Then when the European Commission wants to promote anything, makes a mandate to the European Standardization Organization to produce standards to ease the market. For example, on smart metering, there was a mandate, which is the mandate 441, smart metering, and the text of the mandate is standardization mandate to Sysrtems and ETSI in the field of measurement instruments for the development of an open architecture for utility meters, not only electricity, general utility meters, involving communication protocols enable interoperability. That was set out in 2009, and this mandate was addressed to the European Standardization Organization just to promote the developing of the smart metering. Are the Standardization Organization obliged to follow the mandates? No. The mandate can be accepted or not. Usually, mandates are accepted because before issuing the mandate, there is some consultation from the European Commission to the Standardization Organization just to agree more or less which is the scope of the mandate. So when the mandate is finally issued, the Standardization Organization already agree with this goal of the mandate. So the European organization accepted this mandate. The objective is to create a European standard that will enable interoperability of utility meters, water, gas, electricity, heat, which can be then improved by can improve the means by which customer awareness of actual consumption can be raised in order to allow timely adaptation to the demands. In the end, the final goal is energy efficiency, basically. The other important mandate is the M490, which is the smart grid mandate. This mandate was set out in March 2011 and was a mandate to support European smart grid deployment. All this mandate, the final goal is to provide standards to the manufacturers so that smart grids can be created. How the European organization answered to the mandate? Well, first they have to accept the mandate officially. They jointly send Sysrtems and ETSI. There is a technical board, a joint technical board of the three organizations. They take the mandate, they accept it, they answer to the Commission, and to implement it, they create a working group. This working group is what they call the coordination group. For the smart metering mandate, they created the smart metering coordination group, and for the smart grid mandate, they created the smart grid coordination group. Within the smart grid and the smart metering coordination group, then working groups are created just to develop the standards. The standards are not developed by these working groups. Those working groups has the task to find the gaps in the standards and then to say to the standardization organization which standards they have to develop. In the end, the standardization task is done directly by the technical committees of the organization. These groups only detect the gaps and help to the standardization organization to develop those standards. The output of the mandate, in the end, is a technical report. It's a report where all these working groups of the coordination group collect all the information needed to develop the standards. The output of the mandate M441 was a technical report, this one, that you can consult in internet. And there was another second report later in December 12 with all the conclusion of the smart metering coordination group. The mandate 419 for smart grid also produced several reports which are quite interesting. Complete 4 reports about one to support standards for smart grids, a methodology to implement the standards, an architecture, a general architecture for smart grids, and interoperability with a tool just to see how standards can be implemented in a smart grid, and also an important document about information security, which are the standards, the more relevant standards that should be implemented to achieve a good level of information security in the smart grids. The bibliography, when you can consult all this information, and mainly the web pages of IC, CENELEC, AENOR, and the European Commission. And that's all I wanted to tell you. If you have any doubt, any question,